in linguistics and Chinese linguistics in the Linguistics and English Language Department at the University of Lancaster in the UK. He's also a member of the International Cognitive Linguistics Association. His research combines synchronic and diachronic and developmental approaches in pragmatics and cognitive linguistics. He's interested in diachronic phenomena and language change, and his research is focused on corpus-based and multifactorial analysis of naturalistic interaction occurring in context-specific settings in different languages. One of the core areas of his research is the combination of diachronic developmental and online analysis of theory of mind, face work, and intersubjectivity, about which Professor Tantucci has recently published the book Language and Social Minds, the Semantics and Pragmatics of Intersubjectivity. Today he's going to talk about reciprocity and epistemicity. Is that good? Anyone to add anything?
No, that was already extremely complimentary, so that is more than enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Professor Borthwick. So, Professor Dr. Kate Borthwick is a professorial. I was like highlighting the stress of this word because it's a new one for me. Professorial Fellow of Enterprise at the University of Southampton. She's the Director of Open Online Courses for the university, the Chair of the university's Digital Education Working Group, and a lecturer in digitally mediated teaching and learning in modern language and linguistics. Professor Borthwick's research interests include massive open online courses and language MOOCs, open educational practices and resources, blended learning for languages, digital education, and online course and materials design. She's a member of the Center for Language Study and the Center for Linguistics, Language Education and Acquisition Research Study Groups, and an award-winning teacher and online course designer. Today, Professor Borthwick is going to talk about using MOOCs for knowledge exchange and social engagement.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good, Isabella. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we'll be live soon. Yeah, in 2 minutes, I guess.
So who is going to start? I cannot remember. Is it me starting?
You were gonna start? Yeah.
All right.
Isabella will introduce you. You're gonna start, and then after your talk, we can open for a few questions, and then over to Kate.
Brilliant. Perfect.
Okay, so shall I stop my camera? While Vittoria is talking, I'll mute. Shall I stop my camera as well, or is it better just to keep it on?
Oh, there's no need to be on. In fact, João Pedro, who is backstage, he will control that. So as soon as Vittoria starts, you'll be backstage.
Okay.
And then you return when you start.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, good.
I also have a small question. Is it 40 minutes that we are supposed to? How long is?
Yeah, you can be very free. We thought about like 30 minutes and then 10 minutes for questions, if you don't mind.
Okay,
yeah?
So 40 minutes as a slot.
Okay. There's slot, yeah.
Okay. Are you gonna? Who's chairing? If we talk for too long, who's gonna step in and say? Okay,
yeah.
Isabella is in charge of doing that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Do you guys want me to let you know when we're already like 35 minutes in or 40 minutes in?
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's great.
I'll ask João Pedro to let me in the live. Let you guys know.
Yeah, okay. Eu vou abrir. Depois vai no início. Hi, everyone. Sorry we had some problems, but now we'll be fine. Okay. So on behalf of Gustavo Cunha, who together with me put this research group on pragmatic text and discourse together. This is held at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. So I'd like to thank Vittorio Tantucci from Lancaster University. I also would like to express my gratitude to Kate Borthwick from Southampton University. I am also very thankful to Daniel Martins and João Pedro Marques for their permanent support. And it's wonderful to see so many people here today that had taken their time to join us. We are sorry we had some problems, some technical problems in the beginning, but that was good because it only shows how much energy is put into this event. As you know, there is this lineup of events during the morning and the afternoon, so I hope I can see you again in the afternoon. Now will be over to, I'll give the floor to Isabela Soares, who will introduce Vittorio Tantucci. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our very special event. We would like to thank all of you for being here today. And first, we're gonna have a talk by Professor Vittorio Tantucci. So Professor Dr. Vittorio Tantucci is a senior lecturer in linguistics and Chinese linguistics in the Linguistics and English Language Department at the University of Lancaster in the UK. He's also a member of the International Cognitive Linguistics Association. His research combines synchronic and diachronic and developmental approaches in pragmatics and cognitive linguistics. He's interested in diachronic phenomena of language change, and his research is focused on corpus-based and multifactorial analysis of naturalistic interaction occurring in context-specific settings in different languages. Anna, can you mute your mic? One of the core areas of his research is the combination of diachronic, developmental, and online analysis of theory of mind, face work, and intersubjectivity, about which Professor Tentucci has recently published the book Language and Social Minds, The Semantics and Pragmatics of Intersubjectivity. So today he's going to talk to us about reciprocity and epistemicity. So Professor Tentucci, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Isabella, for this introduction, and thank you, Anna, for inviting me for this lovely event, very prestigious event. I will now try to share my screen. Forgive me if I'm a bit clumsy with this, but I should be able to manage. Can you please confirm that you can see what I'm seeing, like reciprocity and epistemicity? You can see my slides.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, brilliant. So today I'm going to talk about precisely reciprocity and epistemicity, namely what do we expect from others when we provide information, when we tell about a piece of news, a story, what is going on there interactionally. The main contents of this presentation are taken from this paper that I published with Jonathan Culpepper and I-Ching Wang for Journal of Pragmatics that is specifically on this topic. So in this lecture, I will cover 7 points. I will try to do it briefly without being too wordy, despite this being quite a rich topic. I will first try to illustrate what reciprocity is. I will introduce the principle of impoliteness reciprocity that we formulated with Jonathan Culpepper in 2021. I will look at how reciprocity is a very important notion in evolutionary psychology and human behavior as such. I will then move on to specific information transmission, therefore epistemicity and the way we cooperate with one another when we inform one another, strangely enough, oddly enough. Then we'll provide a brief case study on Chinese naturalistic conversation and see whether reciprocity is indeed at work cross-culturally. I will present the results of that study, and then I will formulate 2 important maxims involving epistemic reciprocity. So reciprocity is a key notion in social and evolutionary psychology, but somewhat a neglected one in pragmatics. It has been mentioned here and there in Brown et al. With respect to the mutual vulnerability of face of speakers. Spencer Oti referred to the costs and benefits that should be fair among speakers, and that we should be kept in balance, abiding precisely to reciprocity. Ohashi also referred to the norm of reciprocity, especially while looking at speech acts of thanking, when we say thank you to someone, the degree to which we may thank someone. And specifically looking at politeness as money, in a way that we do produce social payments constantly in everyday interaction. And these social payments do bear some value. They are things that we account for, they are things that we remember, just like money. Also, Jonathan Culpepper in 2011 mentioned briefly the notion of thresholds of impoliteness, and the fact that these thresholds should be matched by interactants. And in 2018, reciprocity was brought to the fore also in diachronic and cross-cultural research. So what is the principle of impoliteness reciprocity? It is an interactional mechanism that has to do with proto-moral balance among speakers. Technically, the working definition is it is a constraint on human interaction, such that there is pressure to match the perceived or anticipated impoliteness of other participants. Therefore, trying always maintaining a balance of payments, that is the ideal state of things, state of affairs. So we do have a balance of costs and benefits among speakers when we interact with one another in every situation of daily life. For instance, a politely formulated request may involve a politeness credit, which can be reciprocated with a politely formulated compliance. And the same would be a play with impolitely formulated insults and counterbalanced, which could be counterbalanced by impolitely formulated counter insults. So we often make assumptions about this sort of balance of social payments, and we take past actions of other people into account. We do remember things, and people to our eyes may sometimes may have more or less prestige, more or less value, precisely because of their actions and the way we account for whether those past actions. This process is conventionalized metaphorically and idiomatically in all the world languages, and we have so many plethora of idiomatic formulae such as I owe you, I'm indebted to you, you'll pay for this, I remember this, 我欠你 in Chinese, which has a similar meaning, and so on and so forth. So the peer is gradient. It's not centered on absolute evaluations of good or bad social behavior. It's really focused on how much should be done to positively or negatively repay what was done linguistically by an interlocutor. The notion of reciprocity has been touched upon in evolutionary psychology and has been seen as a fundamental principle that guides individuals' cooperation through helpful acts with emotions such as gratitude, sympathy, which do regulate social systems. And even morality per se, as such, seems to mostly hinge on reciprocity to control selfish behavior. Reciprocal altruism, socio-normative mechanisms of repayment are key to detect cheaters in society, and therefore concept like proto-social notions, concepts such as resentment and blame, are also fundamental in building up moral values of a social group. So cooperation, therefore, is underpinned by reciprocity. And reciprocity, as I mentioned, may involve an immediate dimension, so the idea that we repay the costs and benefits realized in the here and now of an interaction, or an extended dimension, which is what I was mentioning, having to do really with cultural evolution, long-term balancing of social payments and moral obligations. So remembering all the nice things that this person has done to us really positively affect our behavior and the way we reciprocate this to that person in the future. So is there always a balance in reciprocity? Let's see, I will try to show a video with online presentations. These are always a bit of a bet. This is about Elon Musk being interviewed by the BBC, and he's been asked about why he bought Twitter. Let's see if this works. I don't know. Let's hope so.
Right. Did you do that because you thought that a court would make you do that?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that is the reason.
Right. So you were still trying to get out of it, and then you just were advised by lawyers, look,
yes.
Interesting. So you, yeah. So you didn't actually want to purchase it, even when you said you were going.
All right. So I hope you were able to hear this. You may give me some audio feedback about this if that was the case. But actually, what is happening here, there is a clear flouting of maximum quantity. So we have the journalist asking very specific questions very articulated, providing a lot of information about Musk's decision. And what Musk is doing is simply saying yes. He's not doing much effort in reciprocating all the efforts that the journalist is making in order to get a satisfying answer for the benefit of the audience. So here we have a negative reciprocity mismatch, precisely because Elon Musk is not doing as much as the journalist behavior would entail. So mismatch in reciprocity is really all over the place. It's not that exceptional. Whereas reciprocity is often associated with conventionalized behavior, the way we perform greetings at parties, favors, we thank people, we make requests, we make assertions, acknowledgements. So, for instance, imagine a situation where someone says good night to you at the end of an evening spent together. Of course, you will be under the pressure to reciprocate what that person said to you, and using the conventional formula good night in return. If you didn't do this, so absence of this responsive behavior would produce a mismatch in reciprocity. And your behavior will be perceived as markedly impolite. You're not abiding to conventions. You're doing something special. So silence here is not just a mere action. It will entail and it will generate implicatures of impoliteness. What we found with Jonathan Culpepper in 2021 is that in British English, conventionalized responses to requests such as okay, match utterances that are, again, highly conventionalized, such as can you, but will not match more polite formulae or constructions such as I will be very grateful if you could, blah, blah, blah. In which case, simply saying okay will not be enough. You will be like informants in our study, in our experiment, showed that more should be done in order to counterbalance, to match the effort that was done in the requesting behavior, in the requesting speech act. So again, deviation from the principle of impoliteness or politeness reciprocity shows that unconventionalized behavior involves linguistic markedness. We do something somewhat unexpected, and this is key in order to generate impoliteness and reciprocity mismatches. So how does social cooperation work with information transmission, which is the key topic of today's presentation? Well, Sperber et al. Already noted that information transmission is key for selection of partners for cooperation in any moral system, in any social system. We monitor the reliability and through epistemic vigilance of our partners, of the speakers that we interact with. So information transmissions contributes to face work and reputation of interlocutors in a community. We want to be considered socially reliable, trustful, and engaging individuals. So again, information transmission is not simply like, we are not Wikipedia or ChatGPT-like entities. When we inform others, we are doing face work, we are building our reputation, and this clearly involves politeness and impoliteness. And this is true for information givers, but also most crucially for information recipients. And the way they show cooperatively that what they are hearing is interesting, is positive, is useful for them. So there are conventionalized ways to do this through back channeling. We do it in all the languages of the world. We always say yes, we nod when we listen to people speaking. We use pragmatic markers of agreement. We say yes, absolutely, we align, definitely, that's precisely what you mean, that's precisely the case. And this is precisely to show that being informed of something involves information recipients' pressure to reciprocate, repay the information givers' costs and benefits while they are informing us of something. ecologically, evolutionarily, think about a member of a tribe called James telling you that behind some bushes ahead of you the road is safe, whereas in reality a very dangerous animal, predator, is there ready to eat you. So long-term effects of this may be that after finding out that there was a predator there, it will not be very beneficial for you to further rely on information given by James in the future. And this is something that has been found to be the case already in children cognition by the age of 4, where they start to process informants' reliability and take past accuracy of these informants into account and predict whether new informants might be reliable or not. So again, what is key, the take-home message of this overview is that epistemicity, information transmission, is not simply about saying the truth or not. It really has to do with proto-social cooperation and mechanisms of quid pro quo among group members. We will remember about the information that we passed on to one another, and this will have effect on our reputation. So the principle of impoliteness reciprocity may really be useful to tackle the relationship between epistemicity and impoliteness in terms specifically of balance of costs and benefits. So using the peer to assess how information recipients produce strategies to match or mismatch the efforts that have been realized for information givers might be a new way to analyze impoliteness and epistemicity. It is shown that, for instance, children with specific language impairments and atypical behavior often rely exclusively on back-channeling or minimal responses without contributing much to information flow and therefore epistemic reciprocity. So in this sense, back-channeling, saying, yeah, right, things like that, is really perceived as a bit of a baseline for kind of interaction and engagement, whereas we will normally be expected to do more than simply acknowledge what other people are saying. Consider the excerpt B from the British National Corpus. We have a person who's talking about chord and 5 lines for 5 minutes, blah, 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 talking about bringing in, talking in, bringing in, 4 or 5 lines down there, right? And B's response is, and there's not any reason why once you're not can put another couple of lines, blah, blah, blah. And B's response again here is, but still have a 4 phone for the same purpose. At some point, this is called relevance checking strategy. It's what I call relevance checking strategy. So A is trying to make sure that B is really engaged with the conversation. Why? Because there is a mismatch in reciprocity, in epistemic reciprocity. A is providing a lot of information, whereas B is doing very little to reciprocate A's efforts. So we just have back-channeling, like nothing more than that. However, something more can be done other than back-channeling, namely adding some propositional comment in return to information transmission. This again from the BNC, and B's reply will be, wow, she's really taking off now. So we will have first a back-channeling, acknowledging in turn initial position what the first speaker has said, and then reciprocating, producing new propositional information in return. This like counterbalances epistemic reciprocity among interactants. And finally, even more than that, we can actually cite people's language. This is called resonance. When we resonate with one another, we reuse some of our interactants' language, which is very flattering. We all, as academics, really like very much when we are cited, when we see on Google Scholar that we have a new citation. And that's because people acknowledge that what we are saying is important. The same applies to naturalistic interaction. So when someone says, produces an utterance that reuses some of our words, that has a positive effect also in terms of politeness and impoliteness. So be here saying, without having a crisis, every other year or whatever. Yes, this is exactly one of the reasons we had the crisis last time. And again, this is a yet different and another strategy to reciprocate information transmission. So the research questions to be asked here is, how do people enact reciprocity in information transmission? How do information recipients reciprocate the efforts of information givers? What is the degree to which epistemic status, culture specificity, and speech acts affect reciprocity when epistemicity is at play? And are there some generalizable maxims that can be found, can be stated, that determine the balance of epistemic reciprocity? In order to answer the questions, or try to tentatively do so, we looked at the call-home Chinese corpus of telephone conversations among Chinese speakers. We did this in order to give an intercultural take, a cross-cultural take on reciprocity after looking mainly at British data in the past. Every dialogue includes a young family member, a child or a nephew, calling an older one, father or grandmother. We retrieved the first 1,000 representative speech acts realized by younger to older, and 10,000 more representative speech acts, again, information transmission from older to younger. First of all, age mismatch did not lead to significant results. So despite we tried to control for age here, that wasn't significant. We annotated the responses of information recipients in order to control for reciprocity. This is the way we annotated our data. So we look at the reciprocity, and we will see in a bit how we did so. We checked the elocutionary force, the type of speech act of the information giver and the respondent. We looked at presence of back channels, as we saw before, whether there was a propositional comment in return, as we've just seen, whether there was resonant, and also we controlled for agreement and disagreement. We tested we retrieved data from the corpus, and then we created a questionnaire design. We designed a questionnaire with 36 exchanges controlling for different variables, whereby, again, resonance, agreement, and so on and so forth were controlled for. The informants were Chinese university students from 20 to 30 years of age who accessed the audio and the transcriptions of the exchange, because these are original telephone conversations, via the online system Qualtrics. They rated the responses to information transmission on a 5-point Likert scale, looking at the degree to which the effort of the information giver was reciprocated, was responded to, was matched by the information receiver. So we have very little, neutral, some, a lot of effort. Importantly, this is an important methodological consideration. Speech of information transmission that we looked at were never referring at the receiver. Therefore, in politeness, in the first pair part, in the first term, was never at issue. So really, the focus was on responses here and how information receivers commonly react to the information that they are given. We fitted a chi-square test at this stage quite simply to look at informal perceptions of the information receiver's degrees of effort to reciprocate the cost and benefits of information givers. And what we can see here is this plot shows the personal residuals. So on the y-axis, or at least at the left, it's not quite a y-axis, it's a bit of a grid actually. We have a lot of effort, some effort, neutral, little effort, very effort. And then on the x-axis, or if you will, on the other dimension of the grid, of the table, we have responses only involving silence, responses all involving back channeling, responses having back channeling plus a propositional comment, responsive having back channeling plus resonance, only propositional comment, only resonance. As we can see, the bluer the bubbles and the bigger the bubbles, the more significant the result. So as you can see, the biggest bubble, the biggest blue bubble is the correspondence between resonance and a lot of effort. Then we have relatively very, very big bubble also corresponding in the correspondences between silence and very little effort. And again, also very, very strong, very significant correspondence we have between only back channeling and very little effort, which seem to really confirm what we were discussing before. Whereas when we have back channel and comments on back channeling and responses, we do have matching reciprocity. We have perception of neutral responses. So this will be, for instance, a case of resonance in Chinese. I will translate this for you, for the ones who knows Chinese. 我真的没想到这么漂亮。这个地方是很漂亮，我觉得我们校园特别漂亮。So I would have never imagined this was so beautiful, this place. It is very beautiful. I think our campus is really beautiful. So in this case, this response will correspond to the blue bubble at the top right corner of this plot. It really shows that a lot of effort is perceived in the information receiver response. Why? Because we have resonance, because we have propositional information being returned. We don't have only back channels as we saw before. So the questionnaire, our question, I'm not far off from finishing my presentation. The questionnaire results inform then our corpus-based study. And the figure that we have here really shows 3 important levels that we identified, which were data-driven. We can have a downward shift of the information receiver, which includes either silence or bare presence of back channels. We can have a matching reciprocity when we have back channels plus resonance, or back channels plus comments not involving resonance. And then we have an upward shift, so a very positive comment, very positive reciprocation when we have propositionally full responses that would entail resonance and comments, yet without back channels, which was quite surprising at first. This was also confirmed by our corpus-based analysis. This plot is called a conditional inference tree. Is a machine learning model that basically looks at a vast amount of data by taking into account all the variables that we considered. The way we look at this is we do have some conditions that then lead at some distribution, the bar plots at the bottom. So in the condition of back channels, when there are no back channels, we can look at the first plot at the bottom left. We have upward in reciprocity, so very positive responses, like a lot of effort being made in return by speakers. When back channels were realized, then we do have a further condition. So in the presence of back channels, if there were no comments, we do have an overwhelming downward shift in reciprocity. So people were doing very, very little. And that's what was perceived as well. And which is what we saw in the previous examples, when people just say, yeah, right. This is perceived as very poor engagement, very little effort in order to reciprocate information transmission. On the other hand, when a back channel was also matched with a comment, we do have an overwhelming tendency towards matching reciprocity. Okay, this plot is about speech apps. I will return this perhaps in the Q&As, just because a matter of time. I think I started at 17, so I have 2 minutes to go. So, what our results entailed led us to generalize were two important maxims of epistemic reciprocity, which will underpin the mechanisms of engagement and knowledge exchange, which are the most important components of information transmission. So what we found is that speech acts of information transmission are valued the most when the information receiver returns or reciprocates information giver's efforts by producing more propositional content in return, on the one hand, and resonating with what we heard, therefore engaging with the language of others on the other. And so we have two maxims. One is the engagement, E maxim, which is be interested. Therefore, overtly engage with with proposition P, so as to convey that what P is said is relevant. Avoid responding to what is said with information that bears no relevance to P. The second maxim is the knowledge exchange maxim, the key maxim. Be interesting in return. So be interested, be interesting in return. Produce new propositional knowledge Q in return to P. Avoid absence of any propositional knowledge, either P or Q, in return to what was said previously P. So to explain very briefly, the engagement maxim was manipulated by presence of resonance, back-channeling, and generation of propositional information. So a resonance was addressed as a textual indicator of engagement when the information receiver reuses the linguistic material of information giver. And when there is consistent absence of resonance, that is textual evidence that the information receiver is not perceived as being very interested in the information giver's speech. And these are cases when we have silence or just mere back channeling, which were perceived as the least effortful ways to reciprocate the cost and benefits of the information giver. The second maxim, the key maxim, was addressed by a back channeling and presence of propositional comments in return. So either silence or just back channeling involves no knowledge exchange. You're not doing anything creative in return. And so you have a tendency towards a downward mismatch in reciprocity. What is key here, and the most unexpected finding, is that if information transmission was reciprocated with an utterance that had no back-channeling marker, that will be perceived as a marked effort to contribute to knowledge exchange. So no back-channeling, very good. Absence of back-channeling meant a lot of good stuff, a lot of effort to reciprocate what was heard. Why? This is because we assume these were utterances that were entirely creative, not conventional. The people were not just saying what everyone says in that context all the time. So with yeah, wow, this is crazy, and very conventionalized formula like that are very entrenched. And this really is in line with Leach's interest principle: say what is unpredictable and therefore interesting. So again, conventionalized and recorded behavior involves politic conduct. You do the right thing, you do what is expected, but you're not doing something that is markedly positive. You're not producing a surplus of politeness, and therefore back channels here are some kind of inhibitors of positive reciprocity. So on to the conclusions of my presentation. First of all, the way we react to information transmission, believe it or not, involves impoliteness.
Excuse me, Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have about 8 minutes, so we still have a bit of time. Okay.
All right, well, I think I will end sooner. I did make an effort to conclude as soon as I could. Perhaps I could go back then to the slide on illocutionary force. Okay. But yeah, I will first formulate the conclusions just because I think it's more coherent this way. And then as a surplus of info, I will just go back to that plot. So 5 main points. As I was saying, the way we react to information transmission really has to do with impoliteness and politeness. informing other people is not neutral, and being informed by other people is not socially neutral. We are really working on face work there. We are really showing how much we care about what other people say, how much we value their information, how much we account other people as positive and valuable social members of society. There is a lot of positive phase involved there. And this is something that has been neglected in the politeness and impoliteness literature so far. Generally, like directives are speech acts, like orders are things, or compliments are things that are discussed in politeness and impoliteness literature, not generally simply informing someone that, I don't know, Sainsbury's has delivered some groceries. This is precisely because of a proto-social and evolutionary, we argue, pressure to reciprocate efforts made by others that can be beneficial to us. So reciprocity is both a short-term and a long-term mechanism. It is both immediate and extended. And we know that we will be made accountable of our behavior. And if we value what other people say and we make this overt in language, this will be beneficial to our social image and social persona and our reputation. And therefore, we do try to do that, especially when we think that's beneficial to us. Third point, Chinese naturalistic data suggests that epistemic reciprocity is at work, no matter what is the epistemic status in terms of age. So what we found is, yeah, in Chinese naturalistic data, really epistemic reciprocity seems to be so cardinal, so decisive, that even when there is a power mismatch, which in China and Chinese culture is very much reflected by age difference, it's a Confucian society. Well, even that doesn't really affect how the principle of epistemic of impoliteness and reciprocity is enacted in information transmission. The fourth point of that we found here is conventionalized behavior normalizes responsive behavior, but also inhibits positive reciprocity. What does this mean? When we do the things always the same way, hello, how are you? How are you? Good night, goodbye, goodbye. And we say the right thing, the right moment, in the right context. We are doing what we are expected to do. This, okay, can help, is expected, and therefore is what we would expect as matching reciprocity. However, when someone make more effort, the way to reciprocate that in response cannot be in a conventionalized way. We cannot just do what people normally do there. If someone is extremely kind to us, we need to be extremely kind in return. We cannot just be kind. That would also produce a mismatch. And that is also at play with information transmission. Finally, epistemic reciprocity involves two important maxims, the knowledge exchange maxim and the engagement maxim. The first has to do with the fact that we really need to produce creative new information in return to people who informed us of something. Think about it. If you're at dinner with friends and they are telling you all these very interesting things, and you have nothing to say in return, that is perceived negatively. You're not doing much there. You're not very, and the engagement maxim. So also show that what other people are saying is interesting, is relevant. So engaging with their language, with their words, with their constructions, do display the fact that what they are saying is important. The last minute I will devote to this plot. This plot is it's a network. It's plotted with iGraph. If you're interested, what it shows, we have the information giver at the top right corner, whereas information receiver at the bottom left corner. So dark gray are bubbles involving utterances made by information givers. Light gray are information receivers. So information givers here could realize assertions, evaluations, and presentation. Assertions is when you just say how things are. Evaluations is when you provide your own viewpoint. And presentatives is basically when you make use of evidentials, when you provide knowledge that with respect to some sort of source of information. You're not just saying something as it is, you're really like marking that you know where that piece of information comes from. Anyways, what we can see here is how reciprocity is enacted. So the more red, the redder the lines, each line here is one exchange in our corpus. So you see there are a lot of lines. They have all been annotated. So red lines involves positive reciprocity, whereas blue lines involve negative reciprocity. We can see that in general, when we look at speech acts, when assertions are reciprocated with assertions, there is quite positive, it's more likely that to have positive reciprocity in return. Why? Because again, you have propositional information, you have creative information being reciprocated. Whereas when you just have acknowledgements, you can see the lines here are mostly blue, and that's when you make use of back channels. And therefore, in terms of speech acts, these are not quite enough to reciprocate assertions. I forgot to mention the size of the bubbles corresponds to the frequency. How many assertions do we have in our data set? But interestingly, even directives as response to assertions were considered very often positively, precisely because they would still nonetheless involve components of engagement and propositional contents in return to what was said. So this is an interesting plot simply by looking at the intersection between reciprocity and speech acts in our data set, which is something that I didn't touch upon in the other slides of my presentation. So I will now just return to the slide of the conclusions, and this is it for me today. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present this data and these notions.
Thank you very much, Professor. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Well, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. That was really enriching and enlightening, especially because we have been studying the works that you have with Professor Culpepper on reciprocity in our study group. And actually, the first time that we got to the article, and when I saw that image that you have just explained, I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to understand this. And now it makes a way more sense, and it's really interesting, and especially for me actually, because I am actually studying this in terms of information exchange and online digital exchange of information. So it was very enriching. So we would really strongly like to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm really glad that the plot also came across a bit more clearly through the presentation. Perhaps I should add a bit of a video online on the journal.
I actually have a question. I actually have two questions, but I don't know if that was not clear for me, if you said something in respect to that. But when dealing with the maxims, I was interested in understanding if the maxims are something that you have written based on how you observe that communication happens, or is that more like a prescription of how it should be in order to achieve reciprocity?
This is a very good question. This really boils down to Bryce maxims. So what is really interesting about maxim of cooperation, cognitive cooperation, or logic cooperation, as he used to call them, they sound as prescriptive, right? Do this, do that, and stuff. but they actually they are not prescriptive. They are actually what people do, what people normally do, and this is also the case. We use the same language as the one by Grice, and again, this is really in some ways complements the maxim of quantity in some ways. But to answer your question, it was really data driven. It was it was really determined by what we found in the data. Really, for instance, we would have never expected that. We generally thought of reciprocity as the more the merrier. If you do more in response, you will always be fine. And what this data shows is not necessarily the case. If you reciprocate with a back channel plus doing more, saying some new proposition information, that is not perceived as good as doing the same thing without the back channel. And one might say, wait a minute, why? I am not using the back channel there, so I'm doing kind of less, I'm producing less language. So how does this work? And that really has to do with conventionalization, because back channels are highly conventionalized. So again, it's less creative. If you use a back channel, you just do what you're expected to do there. And therefore, informants in our questionnaire, we assume, perceive that as a less effortful way to reciprocate what was heard. And it was, if the response is entirely creative, without conventionalized ways to respond to information transmission, well, then was perceived as the strongest effort you could make in response. So yes, to answer your question, they were triggered by our findings.
All right, excellent, thank you. We have a question here in the chat. Edelweiss congratulated you on the talk, and she said that she is curious about the variables that you have considered when analyzing positive and negative reciprocity. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I will. Shall I try to share my slides again? Let me see if I am quick enough. I cannot find my slides anymore. Wait a second. Oh, there we go. Found it. Can you see again? Can you guys see what, like the slides? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. I'm just looking for the slide. All right. So here are the variables. So as we said, reciprocity had three levels, three variables. It could be like, as we saw here, it could be like downward matching and upward shift. And this was really led by this plot. So you do have downward shift is when you have silence and back channel. You see it's data driven, it's from the questionnaire. Matching, the M level, matching level is when you have resonance and back channeling, or comment and back channeling. And here they are, neutral. Whereas like you do have a tendency towards effort. If we want to have three levels here, a lot of some effort. When you have resonance or just the propositional comment, resonance is the one with the highest. So there you go. This is how we accounted for this variable. Then the other variables are what we saw in the plot, the scary plot, the network. So you have the locutionary force that we annotated via inter-rater reliability. We were many raters there. So in this case, assertion, this will be one line of code, right? And this will be the response, acknowledgement, so the locutionary force of the respondent. Then back channeling, a factorial variable if it was present or absent, if there was a comment, present or absent, if there was resonance, present or absent, and if there was agreement, present or absent. Agreement didn't play a significant role, unfortunately, in our data, but this is quite in line with other findings related to this in the literature. It's really like whether people agree or not is not a decisive factor for resonance and reciprocity. One might argue, why didn't you measure the length of comments and the length of resonance? We could have done so. We could have done that, and we didn't. So this could be like something that could be done in the future, perhaps. I hope this answered the question. These variables were then plotted for this kind of analysis. That is a conditional inference tree. It's similar to a regression, but it's more a classification model. But I don't want to get too technical with statistics here. I'm not sure if it makes sense.
Okay. Sorry. Anna, just can I?
Okay. Thank you, Victoria, for this insightful talk. I just would like to mention Southampton. I think I went off. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
I think I had a connection problem here again. Yeah. Okay, so thanks to a sharing agreement with the University of Southampton, Kate has shared some data with me about the discussion task in a MOOC, which was designed to lecturers from all nationalities interested in English as a medium of instruction. So this is an attempt, I mean, it's a study that is underway, in which I'm trying to really get to know more about how the principle applies to virtual interactions. And one thing that is very interesting, and I think it applies to and not only a theoretical framework, is the fact that when we are online, when we're not face to face, we would need more to reciprocate in kind. We would need to really effort to reciprocate knowledge that is seen as a gift. And one way to do that, at least in the discussion task, was to provide the course participants with new propositional content related to the task. And also by sounding interesting, as Lichi and by congratulating the colleagues for the kind of knowledge that they were open to exchange. So in sum, what I'm trying to say is that whatever the principle describes goes much beyond face-to-face interaction. And I think it can, or I hope it can, apply to virtual interactions. I'm saying this because these are so much used nowadays. So I think I'm saying this just to let you know how much what you did interests us at this moment. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anna. This is fascinating. I must say, like, I couldn't pick up everything of what you said, but the key take-home message, I think, is in online communication, much more effort is required to reciprocate, precisely because of the distance and the multimodal constraints, which is fascinating. It's really interesting, and something that I haven't thought of concerning like for instance, Teams or Zoom communication, or anyway, computer-mediated communication. It is true that with Jonathan, we have been at the recent IPRA, we have presented a paper that we're working on about online reciprocity. But this is mostly about social network, like social network engagement. What we found there is that, interestingly, there it stops being a face-to-face or one-to-one interaction, but very often you have a third party who enters, and somewhat there is some sort of extended reciprocity. I reciprocate to you to defend this guy, and then you have social communities that are formed based on this sort of like punching back and forth. We've been looking especially into impoliteness there. But it was very interesting, precisely because of that. So what you mentioned, I think, is extremely relevant. We cannot simply look at reciprocity as a byproduct of face-to-face interaction, which is just one of the possible, so many, like there is a plethora of ways in which reciprocity can be enacted, and therefore the context and the multimodal inhibitions that we can encounter are fundamental, are key. So I think research like yours is so much needed, precisely to put the principle and the theory into play, whether if it works or how it works, depending on different contextual conditions. So amazing stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor. This was very interesting for us, and that's really, it really relates to what we have been studying here at UFMG. So we really thank you for that. It was amazing.
Thanks to you. Thank you. It's been an honor.
All right, can we call, okay, Kate is here. Excellent. Okay, guys, so now we're gonna hear from Professor Kate. I'm going to present her. So Professor Dr. Kate Borthwick is a professorial fellow of enterprise at the University of Southampton. She's the director of open online courses for the university, the chair of the university's digital education working group, and a lecturer in digitally mediated teaching and learning in modern languages and linguistics. Professor Borthwick's research interests include massive open online courses and language MOOCs, open educational practices and resources, blended learning for languages, digital education, and online course and materials design. She's a member of the Center for Language Study and the Center for Linguistics, Language Education and Acquisition Research Study Groups, and an award-winning teacher and online course designer. Today, Professor Borthwick is going to talk about using MOOCs for knowledge exchange and social engagement. So, Professor, whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Isabella, and thank you for inviting me. I'm just going to share my slides, and so tell me what you see, and we'll make sure we've got the right slides. Okay, so can you, I've lost you, I can see you, I can't see you in the background now, but I can see my slides. Can you see them okay?
Everything is
okay, so if you're ready, I'll begin.
Sure. I'll let you know when we're about 35 minutes in, okay?
Okay, marvelous, thank you. Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's fantastic to be here to talk about MOOCs for knowledge exchange and social engagement. What I'm going to do in this talk is just have a think about what is a MOOC, and then the MOOC landscape in a kind of post-COVID era, and then think a little bit about what we do at Southampton. Why do we create MOOCs and what do we use them for? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the MOOC that actually Anna Larissa mentioned just a second ago, EMI for Academics, a bit of a case study in knowledge exchange and engagement, and then engagement and community building, and then obviously we'll close. So that's the plan of how we'll go forward. So first of all, What is a MOOC? I think most of us probably think we know what a MOOC is. I'm going to outline a definition of it, though, because I find it's quite important, because I think we probably all think we have a shared understanding of what a MOOC is. But actually, I find when I talk to different groups of people, often that's not the case, especially post-COVID, when we all went online in different ways and we experienced different kinds of online courses. And I think the term MOOC, certainly with a lot of my students, is used as a kind of catch-all open term, which can mean all kinds of online education. And actually, I think in the context of knowledge exchange, it's quite important to remember what an actual MOOC is, what the definition of a MOOC actually is. So it's a type of online course. Crucially, it's free to learn from. So it's open to a large number of people. So that's the massive bit. There's an emphasis on a social and collaborative experience. For example, there's an emphasis on people making comments on the course, sharing information, starting conversations, often sharing their work openly with people, and it's kind of peer reviewing, offering peer learning across participants in the course. So there are a sequence of learning activities linked by a unifying structure or a topic, so short courses of learning. But usually they have a beginning and an end and a coherence to them. So in that respect, they're different from perhaps open educational resources, which might be more personalized, people choosing from them to create their own learning. And so you've got the course of learning, you've got the social collaborative kind of experience. They are very learner-centered in the sense that the learner is in control of their engagement and their learning. And that's quite important too, I think, in the context of knowledge exchange, in the sense that people come to a MOOC because they choose to do it. There are hardly any barriers to doing such a course, so it's free. You take the course, you engage with it, you take from it what you want to as a learner. And certainly we find that some people want to do the whole course from beginning to end. Others don't. They just want perhaps the first week or even just part of the first week. And for them, that content is enough. And they've shared their experience, they've taken from it, they've shared back. And for them, that's part of the learning experience. And so when we think of MOOCs in terms of quality and certainly completion, we're thinking about them very differently from how we might think of another kind of learning or online learning. So some courses offer certificates and some offer certification or credit. Usually that's for payment. So the key things in a MOOC: online, free, low barriers of entry, so anyone can do it, you don't need prior learning. So it's massive, and it's social, collaborative and learner-centered. So what about the success of MOOCs over the years? Well, I've taken this graph from Class Central, which is a website that aggregates MOOC data, and it shows you kind of the development in MOOCs since 2012 up to 2022. And really, I've got it there so you can show the kind of increase, really steep kind of increase in MOOCs from kind of 2012, which was supposed to be the year of the MOOC. And then you go up to 2022 and you just see this steady increase of more and more of these courses. Now, these statistics are for the rest of the world, not including China. And I point that out because I'll say something about that in a second. We know a little bit more now. For a long time, data related to China and MOOCs was a little bit invisible, but we know a bit more, and it's quite interesting as part of understanding that kind of contextual space. So in terms of the recent MOOC space in the world, and again, it's data from classcentral.com, so we're talking big numbers, 220 million students, nearly 1,000 universities, probably more than that now, producing these open courses, nearly 20,000 courses, 70 MOOC-based degrees, so a whole degree being done in this kind of open way. Nearly 2,000 micro-credentials, which are short courses of learning which are accredited, often arising from a MOOC. And then we've got some of the major providers: Coursera, edX, FutureLearn, Swayam for India, and SueTangX for China. There's a question mark because we don't know. But there are other MOOC platform providers all around the world. And obviously the characteristic is a very, very large number of learners. Post-COVID, I find the picture is getting a bit more complicated. I'll say more about that in a minute, especially for MOOCs. So we're beginning to see a real change in the online learning landscape, with MOOCs becoming part of a mix of paid for short courses, paid for longer courses, as more people move online. And obviously people try to make money from teaching online. And so there's a push against the openness, if you like, of the MOOC space. Just to kind of fill that gap about MOOCs in China. So talking about the kind of global MOOC landscape, MOOCs in China, the latest information that I could get is 370 million learners. And that's information from the Chinese Ministry of Education. 52,000, more than that, courses, multiple MOOC platforms where content is being delivered. Accreditation becoming possible through MOOC learning. And then in December 2020, the launch of the Global MOOC Alliance in Beijing. So that was a UNESCO initiative, and that was something that was very much set about promoting open education globally, and it's a global partnership, the MOOC Alliance. And so what you see there is quite an interesting part of the picture. So it's difficult to have comparable data about Chinese MOOCs because the metrics are not always available. We can't always check the data. The definition of MOOC is sometimes different. Coming back to what I said at the beginning, sometimes it's seen as just an online course. But you can see from this information here that the Chinese MOOC activity has really taken off in the same period since 2012. And actually, their activity in the space is greater than the rest of the world combined. So in terms of understanding what's happening in the global online landscape of MOOCs and online learning, it's really quite interesting to see them and describe their particular position. And so the MOOC Alliance, which is led by Tsinghua University in Beijing, but is a global alliance, again, that's interesting as well, because it's part of the Chinese government's desire to promote their own education globally and openly. And I think that's quite an interesting development into the MOOC space. And obviously, post-COVID, all of this activity has rapidly increased. So what do we see during COVID? Well, as you know, as we all did, we moved online incredibly rapidly. One day we were teaching and assessing in the classroom. The next we were grappling with teaching online using whatever platform we had available. So if we remember the joy and perhaps the horror of doing that. In the world of MOOCs, we saw a very large jump in interest and enrolments across the world. And we saw that in Southampton as well. So we have 22 MOOCs in our MOOC program. And we saw a big increase in enrolments across the board, partly because people were looking for things to do when they were locked down, seeing it as an opportunity to develop their skills while they were stuck at home, or to replace their education that they were missing in the classroom. Now, the slide I've got here shows you a graphic again from Class Central, and you can see pre-pandemic, the most followed subjects, so the most popular subjects for MOOCs were things like computer science, programming, business, management and leadership. So courses that were very, we would say, CPD, so continuing professional development type courses, gaining new skills to do better at work, to get a promotion at work, a different job, those kind of things. Post-pandemic, the balance changed a bit, which I think is interesting. So number one comes in at personal development, and then we have art and design appearing, humanities comes in at number 6, communication skills, and then foreign languages, interestingly and pleasingly, comes in at number 10. So you can see the difference between those two kind of lists, I think, is quite heartwarming, really. It's affirming. And I think you see a much more realistic reflection of our education landscape in general in the post-pandemic mix, showing that everything's moving online. It's much more holistic being online. It's not just about functional professional development. It's about everything. It's about everything that we might learn in the online space. So that post-pandemic list, to me, looks much healthier and richer for online education, much closer to that online education, that normal education landscape. Just to finish with the MOOC landscape kind of review, I've got this next slide again from Class Central from 2023, which kind of said, actually, the new normal that wasn't. So you can see here a graph that shows the peak of the lockdown, sort of the 2020 kind of period, people rushing to go online, and then a decline. I mean, still the numbers are very good. I mean, we're in the millions. We're talking of users of MOOCs. So there was a boost in 2020 from the pandemic, but it didn't actually last. And so although MOOCs are still popular, that kind of moment where I think everyone kind of thought, well, here's a great time to really create more MOOCs or push more of them, it didn't really last. And so although at the time a lot of MOOC companies like Coursera, FutureLearn jumped forward perhaps 2 years in terms of the numbers of learners they're expecting to see, the kind of investment they put in, it was a little bit premature. And so you now see that many MOOC companies are laying off staff as they found that investment was premature. But we should emphasize that there's still a huge number of MOOCs, and they are still being used in various ways, and often very interesting ways, often as an enticement for students to come to in-person classes or paid for courses, or operated in a kind of blended model, which was the case before the pandemic, but has become more so, I think, post the pandemic. So let's give you some specific examples of MOOC work from Southampton, from my experience and from our programme. Now, and think about obviously how this relates to knowledge exchange. So just to briefly say, the university made a decision to work with FutureLearn, a British MOOC platform provider. It's a private company. It was created by the Open University, but was recently bought out by Global University Systems, which is a global operation offering education. It has lots of partners, universities across the world and the UK and other organisations like the British Council, the British Library, but they have strong relationships with international universities like in Australia, for example. So across the world, universities produce content and they publish it on the FutureLearn platform. So that means on the platform itself, there's a great range of courses from all over the world and all sorts of providers. And so it's a model which is used by other MOOC providers too, and it offers the benefit that FutureLearn can reach a large number of learners across the world, whereas an individual university can't necessarily do that. It also gives learners, a wide variety of choices. So FutureLearn's particular model is one of high quality in terms of learning design and production and pedagogy. So social learning, mastery learning, peer learning. And when they designed their platform, they had a particular pedagogy embedded within it. And I think it's one that's useful to us when we think about knowledge exchange and social engagement. So let's just say a bit more about Southampton then. So we have 22 short courses, so not very many, been running since 2013, but they've run multiple times over 1 year. So we're getting near to 1 million enrolments now, which is quite exciting. And there's courses from all the faculties. So we have courses ranging from web science to history to English literature, of course, language teaching, running many times. We have a larger number of engaged learners. So when you look at MOOC statistics, you have a number of enrolments, people signing up for them. Usually not everyone comes to learn, they just sign up. But some people are engaged, and so we have more than 350,000 engaged learners from 233 countries. Many comments on the site across all of our courses. So lots of people posting information. Our learners are largely female, more females than males. The majority are working or studying and have a university education. So that's the kind of people that are taking our courses. Why did we engage with FutureLearn in the first place? I think there was an interest in exploring ways of reaching new audiences of learners beyond our campus in person, but also to raise awareness of activities at Southampton, and also to kind of get more staff involved in blended learning and get them more used to creating online content and blended content, but also to experiment and see at the time what MOOCs were about and how they could work for the university. So the reason we work with FutureLearn is particularly that they offered us a good way to get started. a British company, but also we wanted to be part of the evolution of the site. For us, it was important in terms of that social aspect and also knowledge exchange. So we could be involved in their development. We could access their millions of learners. They're a partnership with us, and so they maintain the technical development of the site, and they're constantly improving it, so we don't have to worry about that. They have dedicated a huge amount of time and expertise to developing the site, particularly with this embedded pedagogy to it. And they maintain the site and its user friendliness. And they maintain a lot of the learner analytics as well. And so there's a huge amount of analytic information we can draw from all of our courses individually and then the whole program. And Anna Larissa alluded to that with the study that she's doing related to looking at some of the discussion forums and analysing the interactions there. So, you know, with nearly 2 million comments, there's a lot of interactions you could look at there. So we find, in terms of the impact of the programme, we find we've reached lots of new students, obviously, for our education. So we have a lot of students, nearly 2,000, who, for example, have taken a MOOC and then signed up to come to Southampton and study undergraduate or postgraduate courses. They've enhanced our teaching on campus, so they've encouraged staff to innovate in their teaching and use more technology, either the MOOC itself or simply to create content using digital tools of various kinds. There's lots of experience and skills been brought up and developed within the university in the digital learning team, but across the board. They've enhanced learning. So our postgraduate research students often create content and tutor on MOOCs, and that gives them a really important opportunity to present their academic work to a non-academic audience and to hear what that audience thinks of it and then respond to it. So it's that really nice aspect of knowledge exchange that's public engagement. So you put your ideas out there, you present them to an audience you don't know, who are not specialists, and then they engage with the ideas and tell you what they think, and it's an excellent process. So some of our courses have been embedded into campus-based classes. Obviously, as I've said, we generate a huge amount of research data for staff and students to explore. And our experiences through the FutureLearn network have helped FutureLearn and the network to develop. So sharing, that notion of it's open, we're sharing experiences, we're collaborating with each other. All that shared knowledge is good at just building more knowledge, isn't it? And more collaborations. And so new global partnerships and new collaborations have been possible through this quite small scale program, actually. But the important thing being it's about openness, it's about knowledge exchange, it's about engaging with the world. So I want to focus on the EMI MOOC, which Anna Larissa mentioned. So I've talked generally there about MOOCs and their virtues, if you like, for knowledge exchange, and I hope you can begin to see their potential for it. I'd like to just talk a little bit about one of our courses, so English as a medium of instruction for academics. Now, this is a course in English medium instruction, so it's for educators who have to teach something, but through the medium of English. So it's not an English language course as such, it's a communication course, I suppose. Typically, it attracts a global cohort of learners from all over the world, teachers who are working and having to grapple with EMI. So we've got a lot of enrolments. We've had 14 runs since 2017, and it's currently available on demand. So anyone can take it at any time, and they can work through the course to their own pace. And of course, when you create one of these courses, it's a lot of work to create it and to set it up. But once you've done that, once you have that resource, it then can keep running for you with just a little bit of update. And it opens up other possibilities for you. And so the boundaries can kind of dissolve between the course you've created and then other possible ways of exchanging knowledge and developing perhaps enterprise or engagement opportunities. So just to say a little bit about the course, if you're not familiar with it. So it aims to reach non-native speakers of English, working and living in different cultural settings. It's a 4-week course. Anyone can join it, but obviously it's designed specifically for teachers who are teaching through the medium of English, so you'll get the most out of it if you're in that category. We have about 40,000 learners who've taken an active part in the course, and for this course they tend to be more active. So there's more comments, more discussion, more interest, And we see about something between 2,000 and 6,000 people per run of the course. So the key to learning on the course is that learners should be sharing their knowledge. They should be sharing their own local experiences of EMI in different cultural and educational settings. And the reason that's so important is because EMI is so contextually different in different places. And so it's not possible to create a course that fits everyone. You have to have that sharing and that collaboration of ideas with people bringing their own information to the course. So it embraces that notion of glocal. I'm sure you've heard that term. So the mixture of the global and the local. The global course, but also the local kind of information being fed in. It embraces individual experiences and knowledge alongside more generic ideas of good practice. So what that means is we might make some generic comments from our own research and literature into intercultural awareness and EMI, but then all individual experiences are valued on the course, and we want to hear from them, discuss them, and learn from each other. In that respect, it fits that social learning model of FutureLearn, so peer learning, discussion, sharing ideas, and the course is tutored by lead educators, but they position themselves crucially as equal members within that community of practice. So every time the course runs, it becomes a community of practice, and the lead educators are just part of it. So it has that very egalitarian kind of idea that we're all learning from each other and we are sharing knowledge here. So knowledge exchange, if you like, is key to how the course works, to its design. And the more open nature of a course, so a MOOC, I think drives and enables that kind of exchange. So connected to that is the impact from one course. So obviously we've had lots of learners on the course, and our learners tell us they enjoy it in our feedback questionnaires. So if you like, it does what we want it to do. It's an enjoyable and useful source of education. So that's great. But other things have begun to spin out from it. So we find that there's a sustained community engagement from the EMI community. So very early on, we set up a Facebook group, and we said that if you take the course, you can join the Facebook group and we'll continue the discussion. And so the community starts to exist outside of the course. People are sharing ideas, posts about EMI. The community discussion can continue when the course has stopped, which I think is really interesting and really valuable. Our learners through the Facebook group and through our feedback tell us that they apply the knowledge, that they share the knowledge with others. So you have that ripple effect of people taking a course and then sharing that knowledge, applying it in class, but also actually telling others. It's led for us to unexpected opportunities for enterprise or income generation. And so people have seen the course, taken the course, and then contacted us and said, we'd like more training related to EMI or digital skills. And that training might be online, blended, or in person. And we also integrate the MOOC into other blended training. So you might take the MOOC and then you do some other training in person with us. And so these opportunities start to arise from the openness of the course. We've then used it as the content and the focus for funding bids for teacher education or research projects, for example, into internationalisation or EMI in different regions. So we recently got some funding from the British Council in the UK to develop a kind of EMI training model for the Philippines that then cascaded across all the universities in the Philippines. And we used the MOOC as a kind of hub of open content for teachers in the Philippines to repurpose themselves and use in their own training. And again, so that's an interesting project for us, but it arises from the fact that this is open content and it's allowing that free knowledge exchange and people to take it and repurpose it for what they want. So we've used it in delivering digital content, in co-delivering in different ways, and colleagues at UFMG have facilitated on the course and worked with us in delivering the course very effectively. The course itself is studied by international and local researchers. Often we don't know particularly how it's studied. I sometimes get sent an article written by a researcher in another country saying, I thought you'd be interested, I studied your course and here's my article. And that's quite interesting. We study it ourselves, at least the different connections, and we can take out bits of the course, which we call digital assets. We can use them in class and we can allow others to do so as well. So the British Council takes some of the content, for example, and uses it in China. And so one course of education, which had one purpose and quite a simple purpose when we created it, running continually and being open, has led to a large number of different opportunities for further knowledge exchange, for further sharing and collaboration, which I think is really interesting and unexpected. Now, I put this quote on the slide there. This is from one of my colleagues, a lecturer in applied linguistics. So what she does is she blends the MOOC in with her postgraduate module, English Medium Instruction in Global Education. And she embeds it because the master's course is researcher orientated, but the MOOC is practitioner orientated. And so it makes for a very productive kind of blend when she embeds the course in there. And I think, again, it's another way of joining ideas, working collaboratively, and contributing to that store of knowledge, where you have another aspect of the glocal. You have the local students in Southampton in class discussing EMI, sharing back onto the global course, and you have the global course sharing ideas into the local class at Southampton. So again, a really fortunate and lovely thing to happen from one open course of learning. So one of the key aspects, I think, in making a course engaging and allowing for these opportunities is the learning design. So when you create a MOOC, you do need to think pedagogically, quite a focused way about the learning design. So you need to think about how you chunk the learning up, how you avoid cognitive overload for your students. So you need to view your topic and your subject with kind of clear, fresh eyes. You need to think about the language. How will you address your learners who are not experts, perhaps, or you don't know them, in such a way as to be approachable, rigorous, clear? They'll be from all over the world. So, you know, what instructions will you give? How will you engage with them? What tone will you take? The videos, I think, are really important. How will they land with your audience? How will you come across on camera? You know, in terms of gestures, in terms of tone, in terms of how you are. How do you use your voice and body language to engage your audience? All these things we don't think about in a face-to-face class, do we? But online, it becomes crucially important to think about that, because then it helps you achieve an engaging kind of experience. So in terms of engagement directly, when we're putting a MOOC together, we often talk to our educators and say, well, again, think in this kind of detail. How will you interact with your students online? Think about that. What will the nature of it be? How will they talk to each other? How will they interact with the material? What will you ask them to do? Will you ask questions? Does the order matter? So there's lots of quite forensic detail, I would say, about creating MOOC that we perhaps don't think about in a class because we get so used to the way we deliver face-to-face material. But in a MOOC, you need to really pay attention to that. And we found it was quite interesting. Educators who'd been through the process of creating a MOOC in the past, when COVID happened, I've got a quote here from a lecturer in linguistics. She hit the ground running because she'd thought about all this kind of thing before. So if you were thinking about online engagement, if you were thinking about digital tools, it was already a kind of trained process thinking about the learning design when you're thinking about creating a MOOC. So let's just have a look again a little closely at that MOOC I was talking about, EMI. So EMI, how have we designed it so that we can try and make it as engaging as possible? Okay, so what we do is we put in lots of invitations to share experiences. So as I said, it's all about asking the community to tell us about what's happening in their context. So there's lots of opportunities for discussion. I've got some screenshots here. So tell us about your context of EMI. Say, you know, tell us what it's like where you are. What are your priorities? What are your goals?
Professor, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Excuse me. You have 10 to 15 minutes, all right?
Right, okay. I was cracking on faster. I'll slow down a little bit then. Okay, thank you. So what kind of language do your students expect you to use? And of course, things like that, a question like that is very different depending on the context that you're in. And in some contexts, some educators will say, well, you know, our students want us to use sort of native speaker-like language. But others say, well, actually, no, we're in a more kind of ELF situation. English is a lingua franca. And also, there are lots of expectations around the kind of English that are used, which might be mandated by a language policy at government level or institutional level. And so, we can't possibly know every situation in the world. And so it's quite useful to have that question and have people saying, well, actually, where I am, we have a language policy and we have to use English in this way. And that provokes a discussion where people are sharing their knowledge and experience and learning from each other, and we're learning from them. It's that community of practice kind of idea. And also, solutions to challenges can arise from that discussion as well. So we have that, request for information embedded in the learning design. We also think about a range of different activities so that people can engage with things in the way they want to. So not everyone loves contributing to a discussion forum. In fact, I think mostly people don't. But people can get hooked by different kinds of activities. So for example, here we have one where we say to people, go and find a lecture on YouTube or TED Talks. Tell us why it would work for an EMI context and why you like it, and share it. And so someone might be willing to do an activity and share that, and be less willing to perhaps put a personal comment on, but that would be a really useful, interesting resource perhaps for somebody else looking at the course. So there are different ways of engaging in different activities. So in this one, we've got kind of EMI in action. So we've got a scenario. What if a student's English is better than mine? A kind of panic challenge scenario. And again, it becomes like a kind of teacher EMI therapy session where people are giving each other advice and saying, well, from my experience or from my knowledge, you should do this or that. And we had a lot of these kind of scenarios, which again are encouraging that community of practice engagement, that knowledge exchange, that benefit of learning from each other. So here we had an activity using a concordance tool, LexTutor, where you're having a look at how you can use such kind of tools to support vocabulary learning for academic English. So again, there's the kind of discussion type activities, there's things to listen to, things to read, and then there's research type activities to go and do something, come back and tell us about it. And it does mean that people can engage with the things that appeal to them. If they like a more sort of active approach to what they're doing online, and then different activities will respond to that. And of course, there's the community building that we put in throughout. So we start to build that community of practice, I would say, from the start of the course. So you can see the screenshot there of our Z-map. So we use a tool called Z-map, which enables learners, if they want to mark where they are. And you can zoom in and you can get right down to your town and you can see how many learners there are in your town, but in your country and so on. And the good thing about this map is it's a very effective visual tool for people to understand that they're in an international classroom, people from all over the world, but also that they're not alone. Because it's very easy to feel isolated when you're learning online, to not really realize where people are. You see them in the discussion forum and you see their name, but you get a sort of sense of where they are is difficult. But I think this map really helps. You can look at it and go, wow, there's all these people from all over the world. That's really interesting. That's really exciting. And we use it in all of our courses, and it's a really inviting tool and people enjoy engaging with it. So we also send weekly emails, including information about the course and inviting people to continue, obviously, and to keep learning conversations going. And we do weekly video reviews, and you can see a screenshot here of our two educators, Mary and Rob. And what they do is they engage with the course, and then at the end of each week, they record a sort of summary where they respond to questions that people have asked, and they give extra information, they discuss ideas. And again, it's this kind of idea that, we're trying to foster this community and we want to hear from people. And when UFMG helped us to run the course, we had a UFMG person on one of these videos as well, who was also talking about the same kind of ideas around EMI. So it drives and reinforces that idea that the course is a really welcoming community where you can engage with anyone that's there and you can enjoy different aspects of the course. Now, we also sometimes hold live kind of sessions through Google Hangout or through YouTube, different kinds of ways of operating that. And again, these run while the course is running live. Mary and Rob are there, they're taking live questions, they're responding to people who've been putting things onto the course. So again, it's that idea of we're a community and we're here now and we're talking about the things that really interest us. So each course becomes its own community of practice while it's running, but also we have that broader community of practice that the Facebook group brings together. And we've noticed the ripples from that extending through the flexibility of open content and that kind of focused and constant engagement that we get through running the course over time. So what do our learners tell us that they're doing with the course? So we have very high overall satisfaction rates. I mean, it is 90%, in the 90% area. I've got a quote there. I found your course very useful and fruitful. I've developed new skills and new ideas to apply very soon. And for us, that's really nice that they say to apply very soon, because we want people to be taking the ideas and trying them out and hopefully coming back and telling us what happened. So high satisfaction. Now, a small number of people who turn up and take the course then post comments on. This is well known in literature as the MOOC funnel. So you have the enrollments, people who show up, the people who post, and it's this decreasing funnel. But we find consistently with EMI, around 20% of our learners do put comments on, and it's actually more consistent and more engaged than I would say any of our other courses at Southampton. And the comments tend to be very engaged, so very rich, very thoughtful, very reflective, so very helpful comments for the community to engage with and read. Learners are applying what they've learned. They tell us that through our end of course survey, and they're sharing their ideas. They're downloading some of the assets, and some of them are embedding it in their own EMI courses. And so they're taking those ideas and they're developing them. So again, you see that sort of ripple of good practice that people are learning from the course, thinking about the ideas, perhaps taking the content, talking to colleagues, perhaps then refreshing what they do, or perhaps delivering training in EMI. And so you get something that really becomes a true example, I think, of knowledge exchange kind of in practice, which is very much connected to the design of it and the engagement within the design. Okay, so we're coming to the end now. So my closing slide. So MOOCs in knowledge exchange, my closing thoughts. So MOOCs, insofar as their nature is they are large scale, open, low barriers to access. They're really useful vehicles for knowledge exchange. And we found that at Southampton, and it perhaps surprised and was unexpected for us, but it has led to that. So they have the potential to reach varied and really wide audiences. And that leads to just more knowledge exchange opportunities, more than you can even kind of imagine. You know, the world comes back at you and you're not expecting how. So the MOOC's collaborative and open nature gives rise to this. But we do find that learning design for engaging learning experiences is essential. So really paying attention to that community building aspect. And actually FutureLearn's inbuilt pedagogy helps us with that. So their focus on social learning, their focus on the conversation, if you like, around learning is a really useful one for what we want to achieve. That's what we want to see. We want to have that discussion with the world. So I think effective and engaging MOOC design can respond to a broad range of individual learner needs and preferences and can draw people in, and it can really create an effective community of practice, which I think can help go off in lots of different and wonderful directions, which just lead to more and exciting opportunities. So thank you. That's the end of what I'm going to say. I've got some useful links there, and I'll share the slides later. But I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was great, very enriching. And I would like to share a personal report because I have taken this course, the English as a medium of instruction. And I'd just like to share how it was for me because I was actually really positively impressed, especially with the content of the course and the platform. Because as you said, most people started using these online courses and doing online courses during the pandemic, and I did many courses, and this one was the one that I thought it was the best one because the platform is excellent, it's super user-friendly, it's well organized, you can easily access everything that you want. And this idea of the learning design, because that is really clear in that specific course, probably because it's attached to the university, a very serious and renowned one. And the idea that the course had a flow and it made sense, and also the fact that I had the feeling that it the community, the students who were actually attending the course, we were this community of practice, because when we were participating and engaging in the forums, we would read the responses by others, and eventually you would see the same usernames, and always checking their nationalities, and that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed the course very much, so I can share this personal experience.
Thank you for your comments, Isabella. It's lovely to meet an alumnus of the course. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Let me see here if we have all questions.
I think Isabella is an Isabella is an alumnus of the course, but she also acts as a tutor. Is that right, Isabella? Were you a tutor of the course as well?
No, I was no. This one.
No, I don't think so. But we had some fantastic tutors from UFMG, and particularly we had through several runs of the course where they were involved in the discussion forums and the discussions, and then a bit later involved in kind of the end of week tutor review. And again, it comes back to that idea of the global and the local, having different voices on the course, and very much that's where we'd like to, extend the course more. We feel that already just having sort of Southampton's voices is too narrow. It needs to be broader than that.
Yeah, that was a great experience for us, for sure. And it's interesting to see how people engage in the discussion tasks. Of course, that at first they sometimes hold back, but mostly they make a very good contribution to knowledge exchange, which somehow bridges the last talk we had.
Yeah, and I think so. One of my students has just got her PhD, and her topic was she studied the EMI course, and she looked at transculturality in the course. So she looked at how people were expressing cultural knowledge, and she did a really fantastic analysis of how much cultural awareness was being shown through the comments, and she went back and interviewed some of the participants. And it was really quite interesting to see how much cultural awareness perhaps was needed to engage with the course properly, but also how much was actually going on and how much that was shown linguistically through how people were talking with each other. And so, one course can be a very fertile kind of area for lots of research and lots of interesting things to come out.
That's true, because there is this joint cognition, this common ground that people share. This is really wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got a request, Isabella, from the chat. Have you seen it? Someone asked Kate to for the link, if she could share the link to the course.
Yes, I will just
you can share
it
with us here, and then there's the private chat, and then we can copy and paste.
Okay, I'm just finding it. It's on FutureLearn, so
it's on FutureLearn.
Yeah, and it's on demand. So, okay, let me just pop it into the private chat. Okay, I've popped it into the private chat. So if someone could put that into the main chat.
Can you do that, Isabella or João Pedro? Can you copy and paste to the other chat, please?
Yes, Ludovica. So it's free to join. So FutureLearn are trying to monetize a lot of what they do, but make sure that you scroll down the page and you choose the free to join. As soon as you click join, you have kind of a block of 6 weeks in which to kind of work through it and look at the content. Oh, there we go. I can see the links.
There it is. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody else has a question or a commentary to make. Are you all okay? I think everybody is delighted because your talk was really very insightful, as it has always been. He's saying, great to know. Yeah, all right. Okay, so I thank you very much, Kate, for joining us this morning, this afternoon in England. I thank Isabella Soares for her help here, João Pedro, Daniel for their support. And it's wonderful to see so many people here who could join us and had the opportunity to hear your talk. Thank you, Kate, again. I hope I can see you soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. And thank you to everyone. It's great to see you. Enjoy the rest of your day and this afternoon's presentations.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.